All right, so I want to talk to you about how it's possible to gain weight in a caloric deficit. And it's not against the laws of thermodynamics, doesn't counteract the laws of physics. It's a specific scenario where you actually can gain scale weight, and I'm talking like 3, 4, 5, maybe up to 10 pounds of scale weight while you're in an honest to goodness caloric deficit. I'm going to use the example of an individual who shot me a DM on Twitter a few days ago, and she's on this weight loss journey, and she's already lost 90 pounds, right? So she's totally kicking butt, doing an amazing job, and then all of a sudden everything comes to a grinding stop. And not only does her weight loss plateau, but she starts gaining weight, okay? She hasn't changed her diet, she's not eating more food, and so she was really frustrated, obviously. So she messages me, and of course I have to ask a few questions, right? I can't really help you if I don't understand your situation. So I asked her, how are you eating? And this girl's got, here's how many calories I'm eating, here's my protein, here's my carbs. So she's like diligently tracking, and she has her logs, so I know that she's like all about it. And at the same time, she's lost 90 pounds. So clearly she's doing things right. It's not like she got no results and then she's saying, hey, counting my calories isn't working for me. So she's counting her calories, she's tracking her macros, she's losing weight, and then all of a sudden a halt and a reversal, okay? Now, if you're familiar with how calories in, calories out, thermodynamics, how this is supposed to work, it's supposed to be physically impossible for you to gain weight when you are in a caloric deficit. You're not eating in excess of energy, therefore energy equals matter, right? You cannot take the excess energy and turn it into matter and store it. But sure enough, she's using the same scale, she's checking her weight. I mean, this is a smart girl, right? So she's not stupid, she's not weighing herself wrong, she's not counting her calories wrong, and sure enough, she had gained over 4 pounds. So I asked her some more questions. How's your exercise look? And she says, well, I'm exercising 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and if I'm going off memory here, but I think it was 6 days a week, could have been 5, but she's getting after it, right? So she's exercising in a deficit, she's counting her calories and her macros, and she's eating about 1,400 calories a day, 100 and something grams of protein, like everything looks good. And so I already suspected what the problem was, and so I asked her, now how are you sleeping? Like, how are you managing stress? And it turns out she's only sleeping 4 hours a night on average. And so what happened in this case, and what happens often, and probably the biggest flaw with calories in, calories out, and tracking macros is if you are eating less energy than you are burning, then you should lose weight, right? But what happens is, without some guidance or without really setting up a good plan, and I've seen this happen often, what happens is you create a calorie deficit like this girl did. You're eating well, you're busting your butt, you're exercising, so she's doing everything right on the surface, and yet her results stall, she starts gaining weight. So basically, when you exercise, which is good for you, obviously, but exercise is a form of stress. And so when you over-exercise, when you train too hard relative to your ability to recover, what happens is your stress levels go up, your cortisol levels go up. Cortisol is a stress hormone that has a lot of negative effects when it's elevated too much, right? So cortisol is not bad. You need cortisol. You would die without it, actually. It's something that's good in the proper amount, just like testosterone, just like fat-burning hormones. All these things that you have in your body have a purpose, but it's when you have dysregulation or too much. So basically, she's busting her ass, training really hard, and what happens is her stress levels are going up, okay? She's in a caloric deficit, okay? So a chronic caloric deficit is also placing stress on the body. So if you think about it, a mild caloric deficit, not such a big deal, but a lot of people create these big deficits, and what happens with a big deficit short term is it's okay, but a big deficit chronically is what like a true starvation mode, and I don't like that term because it gets thrown around, people misunderstand it, but starvation mode, quote unquote, is chronically undereating energy for a prolonged period, okay? What happens is you are eating a deficit already. Then you're exercising, creating a much larger deficit. And so you have your body, if you think evolutionarily as an adaptive organism, your body seeks homeostasis. Your body does not want you to lose weight, and it does not want you to gain muscle or whatever you're trying to do. Your body's trying to fight you tooth and nail. And so what happens is you make this big deficit through exercise and a reduction in energy or calories, right? So you've got this big deficit, weight's coming off, everything's cool, but day after day, when this becomes chronic, your body is already downregulating processes to conserve energy and fight you and achieve a new homeostasis. So what happened to this poor girl is she's working really hard, doing everything right, with the exception of sleep. And to cover why she wasn't sleeping, the only way she could get to the gym, because she doesn't work close to home, she has a long commute with traffic, so the only way she could get to the gym was to sacrifice sleep to go train. Now, hats off to her for sacrificing and, putting her body through hell to lose this 90 pounds. But basically, from asking the questions, I already understood she had what's similar to like overtrained athlete syndrome or whatever. She had stressed her body to the max, and her body's starting to break down at this point. Cortisol is going up. Cortisol causes fluid retention. Okay, so the way that you can gain weight in a caloric deficit, it's true that if you're in a caloric deficit, a true caloric deficit, and you cannot gain physical matter in the form of fat tissue or muscle tissue on top of your current weight. So if you're in a caloric deficit, you can build muscle and burn fat at the same time. Your body can break down fatty acids and break down fat for fuel, and at the same time build muscle. This is how you see people lose 20 pounds, yet they gained muscle while they lost 20 pounds. So if somebody says you can't build muscle and burn fat at the same time, you should probably disregard, or maybe that's the only thing they're wrong on. You should at least be cautious with listening to any other advice they give you, because it's patently false, right? You do gain muscle in response to resistance training and having adequate protein in your diet, and you can burn fat at the same time. And which is what happened, I'm sure, in this girl's case. As she's losing the 90 pounds, she's also gaining some muscle. So, but be that as it may, in a deficit, you cannot add scale weight. So you cannot add scale weight in the form of additional biological tissue. So knowing that she could not have possibly gained 4 pounds of fat or muscle or whatever in this time period, the only thing she could have gained is fluid, right? She could have only gained fluid. She could only be retaining fluid, retaining water. And so I knew that was it. So what I did is I suggested, hey, I know that this is going to sound crazy, because what she was about to do was, I've hit a plateau, I started gaining weight, I better exercise more, or I better cut calories. And what would have happened to her at this point is she's eating 1,400 calories. She's exercising a 500 to 700 calorie deficit. So her body's functioning on fewer than what it needs calorically on a chronic basis to sustain healthy bodily functions. She's going to trash herself worse. She's going to cause potential long-term damage to her metabolic system. Basically, adaptive thermogenesis, your body's desire to seek homeostasis, downregulate your metabolism happens, and this happened to her. And basically, cutting calories, increasing exercise would have just made the problem worse. Would have eventually ended up causing just feeling like absolute trash, loss of mental performance, all kinds of stuff, and maybe even chronic health issues. So what I suggested to her, and you may identify with this situation, but what I suggested is, look, you can't sleep 4 hours a night. You need to get at least 6.5, closer to 7 is better. I don't necessarily say you've got to get 8 just because there's variability amongst people. I can't sleep past 7. If I try, I automatically wake up at 7 hours, almost on the dot. So, you may be a 7-hour person where that's ideal for you. You may be an 8. Some people are even more than 8. But knowing that she needed to reduce stress, reduce cortisol, like I suggested, if you can afford a massage, you can, as far as physical activity, nature walks to help be out in some green, get fresh air, reduce stress levels, whatever it is that you find calms you and relieves stress, mental and physical stress. Don't exercise for a week. Which is really hard when you've been doing this and you've lost 90 pounds. But don't exercise for a week. Focus on sleep and just de-stress. Get your body healthy. Get your body back to a normal state. A lot of coaches and athletes are familiar with Deload, And what that means is that when you push hard and you train hard, the central nervous system can only handle so much. And you purposely overtrain, you purposely go a little too hard, knowing that at a point, maybe it's 4 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the case is, there's little cues you can use. But when you get to a certain point, you're going to deload. You're going to take an easy week, or maybe it's more than a week, and you're going to reduce your training volume, reduce your training intensity, take an extra day off, or whatever the case is. There's different ways to do it. But basically, less was more in this case, or less is more in this case. And so what compelled me to shoot this video is I made these suggestions to this person. And what happened was I didn't talk to her for 2 days. And then today she DM'd me on Twitter. And so she said, hey, I want to give you an update. I did what you suggested. I've been resting my body, didn't go to the gym. I got more sleep. I've been de-stressing, and I lost 4 pounds. And so the 4 pounds she gained, sure enough, as I suspected, were 4 pounds of fluid retention brought on by a stress level too high for her body to cope with. So the reason I mention this is the pitfall with eat less, move more, right? If you work out and you do the right things and you consume less energy than you are expending every day, yes, you should lose weight, right? That is how it should work. But because people get motivated, or sometimes they're a little too motivated, overzealous, and it's coming from a very good place, right? It's coming from they're busting their butt and working hard. This is not somebody who's lazy and says, oh, I've tried everything and I can't lose weight. This is somebody who literally did everything and tried everything and hit a plateau. So I want to point out this type of situation when it comes to losing weight or building muscle, for gaining mass for that matter. If you want to gain lean mass, let's say you've been in a long weight loss journey and now it's time to start gaining muscle. You want to create a reduction in energy to lose weight, dietary energy, and that's going to come from eating differently, right? Or from exercise. You can burn calories through exercise, but you don't want a massive deficit. You want to create fat loss. You want to make a change. I talked about this in an earlier video, how your body is an adaptive organism and progressive overload. And so the progressive overload in response to resistance training, if you watch that video, there's also the same principle toward fat loss. So if you radically change everything and create this giant deficit, you will do well and you will lose weight, but you will get to a point where your body finds homeostasis. Now you're screwed because there's nowhere else for you to go with regards to cutting calories or making a bigger deficit. So when you set a goal, be it to gain lean mass, you're focusing on hypertrophy, or you want to lose body fat, it's important to make a change stimulus-wise that's going to produce a positive effect, but not get overzealous or not go too hard with it. Because that doesn't mean don't train hard. For sure, however many minutes your training sessions are, you should be getting after it, you should be training hard. But you've got to titrate your energy reductions. You've got to titrate your gains in strength or whatever the case is. So sometimes less is more. And in this case, less is more. And I suspect that for a lot of you who are after weight loss or who are after lean mass gains, you can gain predominantly lean mass, put on quality muscle as a male or a female without gaining much body fat at all if you are judicious about the caloric increase and you consume additional energy. So if you do it right and you go in a small stair step of either excess energy to gain lean mass or reduced energy to lose body fat, you've got to do it in a stair step so that as the body adapts and seeks homeostasis, you can then titrate, or like a stair step, make another reduction or increase to keep your results coming. There will always be plateaus for a brief time, relatively speaking, because nothing is linear. You're not just going to lose 100 pounds in a perfect slope. You're not going to gain 20 pounds of muscle in a perfect slope. Your body's going to fight you, and it's going to be a stair step. And what will help you get past those plateaus is being able to change, either stick with if what you're doing is structured properly, maybe you just need to stick with it a few weeks longer, or at that point you can make an adjustment. But when you've basically created a chasm instead of a stair step, when your body seeks homeostasis in response to your chasm, at that point you're stuck. So in her case, it took rest, it took no exercise, it took basically stepping back, and that reduced the stress levels, the water weight came off. And so now I'm going to suggest that she go back to exercise after that week with brief resistance training, not so cardio heavy like she was doing before. And then we're gonna see how she responds to that. But I felt it was important to put this video out, by far the longest one that I've done, because you hear all the time that you cannot gain weight in a caloric deficit, that it is impossible, and that's actually not true. You can gain weight in a caloric deficit for sure if you are overly stressed and you retain fluid, but it's important to designate the weight that you're gaining is not actual body mass. It's not biological fat and muscle tissue, okay? What you're gaining is fluid. And so it's really easy to get rid of that fluid just as fast as it came on by de-stressing and by letting your body rest and doing exactly what we did in this person's instance. And if you've got questions about this, if I need to expand on this, by all means, comment below. And I understand this video was a little longer than normal, so if you're still with me, I appreciate it. And as you guys DM and as you guys reach out, when something like this comes up that I feel is highly beneficial for a decent number of people beyond the person asking the question, I'll go ahead and do a video like this where we kind of deep dive a little bit into the scenario. So thanks for staying with me. I appreciate it.